to the city council on these topics. Let's see. As part of this, we're planning to do an affordable housing presentation. Michaela and Morgan and I discussed this as well. Let's see, Macon Perkins was also on that call with us. And we decided to set up a separate meeting to go through the affordable housing presentation once again. So just a reminder to everyone to please take the doodle poll if you are interested in attending that affordable housing presentation. And then Michaela, I don't think we're ready.
Is there a question?
Oh, we are. Okay, great. Then let's go right ahead.
No. Question.
Oh, sure.
Could we put a deadline on that doodle poll just so it's a lot, so I don't want to hold up on all of those dates, and if we can hone in on a date, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. It's looking like right now the December 1st date is the best date. So I would say cancel everything up until that point at this time. And then for those of you who are interested and have not had a chance to do that doodle poll, please do go and do that by the end of the week would be helpful. I'm curious too, would you be interested in opening it up to neighborhood association boards? I only right now have 4 people that have registered from the NLA, and 1 is from the neighborhood associations, which I wasn't anticipating, but if that's something that the group wants, I'm happy to extend that invitation to everyone.
I think that's a great idea, is to go ahead and open it. If there are only 4 NLA, do we still have to public notice this meeting?
Not at this point, but if we do get to 7, then we will have to public notice it. What we've done in the past for that is just note that it is a public meeting, but more of a training. So there won't be discussion, but we'll be hearing from Lynn McConnell and the housing staff about the affordable housing program, what the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is working on, and how the neighborhood associations can support that work should they feel compelled.
That sounds great. Thanks for the update there, Michaela. So at this point,
there will not be discussion at that meeting?
On affordable housing, no, it'll be information only. And then if something that you hear at that meeting is something you want to bring forward to the group, you can do that. We're hoping to have it before our December meeting, so you can bring that up in December to the committee to take action or discuss further.
Got it.
Sounds good. So at this point, I just want to open it up. Is there anyone from the NLA, any representatives who would like to bring forward concerns or comments on the camping code, and or if you do have any suggested actions for our committee? So this could take the form. This could take the form of something in writing in support of the changes, or requesting additional changes, or opposing the changes.
And I can offer just a little bit of background. So typically with the NLA, what would happen is we have someone come and share what they're working on about a project, like we will later this during this meeting. We'll have Cassie Lacey come and talk about the home energy score. Because the NLA took off a couple of months this summer, the camping code was being developed during that time, and we're at the end of that process. And so we haven't had someone come and present on that. Council is actually going to be doing the first reading and a public hearing next Wednesday. And so tomorrow we'll be sending out a media release with information on how to attend that hearing and how to provide public comment at that hearing. As well as the updated draft camping code. And then we've created a quick reference document for those of you who aren't interested in reading a lot of pages that are very technical about the camping code. The quick reference guide is about a couple of pages long, and it really details like what is in the bulk of that code. So that's going to be coming out tomorrow, and you can share that with your boards.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. Any questions?
It'll be online, so
yes,
we'll share it that way.
Michaela, I had a question. Is the new council and the folks that have been elected going to have any impact on what's going forward with this camping code?
Right. So at this time, no, the new council wouldn't be taking their seats until January. So at this time, what they do is they come in and start to learn like how the city operates with some orientations and whatnot, but they're not doing the actual voting. And we anticipate that the code will be adopted by the sitting council before they are in position.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Next item, we've got a liaison opportunity. Do we have anyone from the group who might be interested in going to the November 14th Planning Commission work session? So we were invited to attend the work session, which will cover changes to the Bend Development Code, Bend Comprehensive Plan, and the Transportation System Plan. And Pauline will be available to explain the changes.
Yeah, she's here now,
those.
and she has a couple slides so that she can share those and just explain what the code changes are about. And you as a committee can decide, do we want someone to be at this work session representing the NLA? If we decide that it's not something you're interested in, that's fine too. But this is an opportunity you're being provided with. So with that, Pauline, like, you're welcome to share what these changes are about.
All right, and you can still hear me, everybody? Okay, good. My name is Pauline Hardy. For those of you I haven't met, I am with the planning department, and I work solely on updating the Bend Development Code. So whenever we do amendments, we typically bring either the amendments to the NLA, and then like Michaela was saying, during our work sessions with Planning Commission, we always invite a member from the NLA to participate during that work session so they can bring additional information back to this committee. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Look at my PowerPoint. I'll go through this pretty quick. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any of the details of the code update. So we are doing amendments. It's a really large package, actually, and we've been working with staff for almost a year now on amendments to our Bend Comprehensive Plan, to the Transportation System Plan, and also to the Bend Development Code. And the primary purposes of these amendments is really to tie the Bend Development Code to the recently adopted Transportation System Plan, and then the Bend Standards and Specs. The Transportation System Plan, I believe, was updated in 2020 and has a lot of terms and maps that doesn't quite fit in with the Bend Development Code terminology and requirements. And then the Standards and Specs was updated this past year. And again, the right-of-way improvements and infrastructure doesn't quite tie neatly with the Bend Development Code. So primary focus of these amendments is for consistency between all three documents. And then we always, with any code update, if there's housekeeping amendments, we do include those. So for the amendments to the comprehensive plan, the transportation system plan, they are really just updating some maps to match the key routes for low stress networks and mobility hubs to the maps in the Bend comprehensive plan and the transportation system plan. And then we are also updating a policy in the Bend comprehensive plan. And I believe it's about landscaping and medians. So the Bend Development Code has several code amendments, and we, with any code update that you ever see me bring to you, we always are working on improving our definitions and adding new definitions. So we've added a lot of revised definitions. Basically, for example, our access corridors, which are like multi-use paths, we're trying to make sure that those definitions match what was in the transportation system plan, as well as the Bend standards and specs. That's just one example. There's lots of new definitions and revised ones in that chapter. And then our residential districts, chapter 2.1, as with all the districts in the Bend Development Code, we are adding to the use table a new use called mobility hubs. We are clarifying setbacks in the residential district. I believe this is for the rural residential district. We are clarifying that cottage housing can count as a middle housing type. So in the residential districts, if you are doing a development, it's over 3 acres, you have to provide and you're zoned medium density or high density, you have to provide a mix of housing. And today it only says duplexes, triplexes, quads, and I think townhomes. We want to make sure cottage housing, being a missing middle type, is also allowed to meet that housing mix. And then in the other design standards, we are making some amendments to the drainage standards, and I believe it was the driveway standard. And this last part is just, again, showing that we're adding mobility hubs to all the other use tables in the Bend Development Code. So chapter 3.1, which is our lot, parcel, and block design access circulation chapter, that's all it focuses on. And so there's quite a few amendments in this chapter, as well as in 3.4, which is our public infrastructure chapter. So 3.1, we are looking at updating the street connectivity and formation of block standards. And you'll see throughout this package of amendments, we're really trying to make sure that the standards, what we're touching anyways, are clear and objective. And in some cases, there might be a reason not to have a clear and objective standard. So for example, if you are doing a lot block formation and the standard says that it has to be, every block is 660 feet. In some cases, that is not possible. And so we want to add what we call a discretionary path, that an applicant can request to go through this discretionary path to not meet that clear and objective standard. And in return, if the city engineer approves that discretionary path, maybe we can ask for a pathway instead. And this is really geared towards projects with needed housing, because state law says when you have an application for needed housing, the standard has to be very clear and objective. There's no gray. So we're adding clear and objective standards along with the discretionary path for a number of standards in this code update. We are making it very clear when alleys will be required and adding a discretionary path of when alleys won't be required for housing. And then we are updating our offsite multimodal facilities. So this really focuses on multi-use paths, and we are renaming it to access corridor facilities to match the definitions. We're just a minor update to the landscape chapter about stormwater facility landscaping, minor updates to the parking chapter for residential parking in our commercial and mixed use zones. And then for public improvement standards, again, this is a large one. And the primary focus in chapter 3.4 is in the code today. We focus on if a development comes through and they need to dedicate right of way. For example, we might say we need 60-foot right of way here for a local street. The development code then goes into even more detail saying how wide those sidewalks need to be, the bike lanes, and the travel lanes. The recently adopted Bend standards and specs now has all that information in the standards and specs, and it no longer belongs in the Bend Development Code. So all that will be required in the Bend Development Code is saying upfront how much right of way we need. And then when they go to develop, they'll look at the standards and specs and then they'll find out how wide their sidewalks have to be, travel lanes and bike lanes. We are updating the, let's see, not to go into too much detail, private streets are going to be prohibited. Currently they are allowed in the city of Bend. Lots of issues with that. So the proposed code recognizes the existing private streets, especially in master plans, and that those can continue. But a new development or a new master plan that comes in or land division, private streets will no longer be allowed. And then cul-de-sacs, they're still allowed, but with housing, we had to add a clear and objective track and then and a discretionary track so that if a cul-de-sac is needed, there is a route for a developer to get there. Chapter 3.5, just clarifying on-site drainage for different zoning districts. And then in chapter 3.6, this is our chapter that adds special standards for certain uses. So the amendments here focus on accessory dwelling units to townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and quads. For example, townhomes is not clear and objective when an alley is required. So the amendments add a clear and objective track for alley requirements and then a discretionary track. The mobility hubs is going to be a certain use that will have certain standards. So we added mobility hubs along with a handful of standards that would be required if a developer is going to propose a mobility hub, and other items that can be included in that mobility hub. And then for short-term rentals, the parking stall dimensions didn't match what is in other sections of the code. So we clarified that. And we also clarified that required parking does have to be paved. And then for development alternatives, this chapter includes a whole bunch of different alternatives. So this includes our cottage housing type of development, shared courts, small lot developments, plus many others. And with the amendments not to allow private streets anymore, we needed to clean up mid-block developments as well as T courts. We wanted to clarify garage setbacks for cottage housing and cottage cluster developments. And then shared courts, we wanted to clarify a design standard as well as, I think it was really just the design standard for that one. And then the last one is our chapter 4, which includes all the processes. So if a person wants to go and build a new building, they go through site plan review. If a person wants to go create new lots, they'll go through a land division process. So in chapter 4, it includes all our different processes, and we are making amendments to almost every single chapter section in there. So in chapter 4.1, again, clarifying that we're going to be creating this discretionary track and a type 1 application, which is if there's basically a building permit for something very simple, like a duplex or a triplex, but they want to go through a discretionary track, clarifying that that gets bumped up now to a type 2 process. Amendments to site plan review and minimum development standards, clarifying when these apply. And then our application, as odd as it is, for site plan or minimum development standards didn't quite match the text in the code. So we're just clarifying and cleaning that up so everything matches. For our land divisions, fairly new. Many of you were here when we adopted the Senate Bill 458 requirements. We have to make one fix to that to match the actual bill. And then we've been working through actually quite a few Senate Bill 458 land divisions. So this is for middle housing, like a duplex, triplex, or quadplex. If someone wants to come in and do a land division for these types of uses, that they can. But the requirement right now requires a licensed architect to always review what they're proposing and submit a letter saying how they comply with the residential specialty code. Well, in certain cases, like if you build a detached duplex and they're 6 feet apart, there's no need to have a licensed person actually submit that letter because it clearly meets the building code. So we're still requiring the letter, but if they meet certain criteria, then it doesn't have to be by a licensed in the state, licensed professional license in the state of Oregon. Master plans, similar to what we talked about before, just allowing cottages to count towards a mix of housing units. And if a developer is going to propose or has to propose, 10% open space, that open space in a master plan cannot be completely fenced off. And then it has to be usable to the people of the master plan area or the public, just making it very clear what open space means. We are doing amendments to the transportation analysis to be consistent with the transportation system plan. And then we have a chapter, the transportation and parking demand management plan, which is required for some large master plans. And we want, and this is, if you're going to have like a large master plan for employment, you get trip reductions or parking reductions if you meet certain criteria. And we want to make sure that if they were to propose a mobility hub, that they got credit for that. Annexation is just a clarification on what criteria you use for an area plan. And then variances, this has been on my radar for quite a while to clean up, but there is no criteria for vehicle access or on-site circulation standards variances. So I looked at other cities and drafted that for the city of Bend. So if someone wants to not meet a particular access or circulation standard, they will now have a variance process that they can apply for and go through. And then just clarifying for non-conforming uses that if they're doing addition, that it must comply with the Bend Development Code and not increase the non-conformity of a building. So I went through very fast. It's a lot of information. It's almost 100 pages long of proposed amendments. So if you have any questions, I can definitely try and answer them for you. And then if anybody does have an interest, we would invite you to the Planning Commission's work session on Monday, and that is at 5:30.
Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
I just said thank you.
Well, everybody's
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks.
You know, the Monday she's
Yeah.
talking,
Next Monday,
next
Yeah.
one, what's the date?
Yeah.
the 14th.
So this topic has been brought up at the land use chair networking group. So all of the land use chairs have been kind of at least advised of it. I don't know if everybody's actually looked at all of this. And then we've had a couple of people that have really dug into the details. And, you know, Pauline, you've just been absolutely wonderful. I know that you responded very, very quickly to some of our concerns and some of our questions, and that's been really helpful. So thanks for your partnership in looking at these code changes. It was a lot of work.
Thank you. And I want to say that that several staff have been helping me with that and with the quick responses. So give them credit too. And they'll be at the work session to answer more technical questions if those come up about some of the amendments.
That's great.
I have
And
a
then
couple questions for Pauline now, since we're so far ahead of schedule. I noticed that when transportation projects are being done by the city, I'm in River West, and Newport Avenue is in the process of being completed. It seemed like the design standards that the city staff were applying to the Newport project didn't really meet the development code. And I couldn't figure out why that would be. Like, sidewalk width seemed too narrow for that area. Since it's a neighborhood commercial use, I thought sidewalk width should have been 8 feet, not 6 feet. And I couldn't figure out exactly why they did that. And I never got a straight answer, but I did look through the development code, and I thought I saw kind of an exemption from the development code for public projects. And so I was just curious, since you're here with us today, and you mentioned that development code standards are now incorporated into the city street standards, if that is something that would be solved by that. And maybe something else too is not, it's a little different but related, is that, like, on that road project with Newport, with existing commercial businesses, the city designer team didn't include bike racks, bike parking, which I thought was a bummer. And I brought it up to them, and they did decide to come back and add them. But I wondered if we wanted that to be something that's just sort of standard when there are road projects in commercial districts. Is that something that goes in the development code, or is it a street standard, or, where does that live?
So the first part of that is beyond my area of expertise. I would definitely talk to the project manager for the Newport project. But when it comes to bike racks, the only time the Bend Development Code looks at bike rack installation is on private property. If let's say Newport Market was adding on, and they have to go through a site plan review application, or even a minimum development standards application. If it's a small addition, we will make sure that they comply with the bicycle parking requirements. And if not, then they have to put additional on-site bike parking. But the Bend Development Code does not touch bike parking in the right-of-ways.
Right-of-way. Okay. Okay. And then one more question for you. I've noticed in River West some larger scale developments, a lot of multifamily related on the COCC or in partnership with COCC, and then some other larger developments, either single family or duplex projects, are popping up in locations where it's green space, and there are lots of, I'll call them goat trails through the city, in River West, in certain parts of River West. And, my comments to the developers are always like, please provide, just a public throughway so that people who are walking or biking don't have to go, now circumnavigate a long distance when before they might take that goat trail. And they never do it because they say that it's not shown on the low stress bike network. And There's no low stress bike network though in the neighborhood. So it's like, oh, okay, we're not going to rectify any issue here. But
so yeah, we will rely on the maps because we have to be clear and objective. We can't just, take from developers. So we have to be clear and objective on what is being required of them. So we will refer to the maps in the transportation system plan and the comprehensive plan that address bike paths and pedestrian paths. And I believe, I don't know the exact name of their department, private engineering maybe, but they are working on, I believe, a pedestrian plan. So we'll have our bike plan, we'll have a pedestrian plan, and then we'll be able to rely on those as well. But if there's not a line shown on a particular development, then we won't be able to ask for that trail to be improved.
okay.
I had a process question. I just want to better understand the process. Pauline, you said that there's going to be a planning commission meeting where what you've described to us will be presented to the planning commission. And are they coming at it as cold as we are? I mean, this is very technical stuff. Do they get educated before, or is it just like a 2-hour meeting and all this is dumped on them and they make some sort of quick recommendation that goes to the council, or is it more? Are they more educated than that?
I would say that, they are familiar with the Bend Development Code, and they are familiar when I bring packages to them they'll have the draft this week. Actually, it's going out tonight, and then a memo that describes the proposed amendments. So the idea is, they'll review the information provided to them prior to the work session. And then at the work session, I have a much more thorough PowerPoint presentation to give to them. And they can ask questions. It's an open discussion. And then we will go to public hearing on December 12th. So if they need more information, they can ask staff to bring it back for the public hearing. If there's questions I can't address, I can bring those answers back during the public hearing as well. So they'll have a very thorough presentation on, what did we say, November 14th. And then I typically do the same presentation for the public record and for the public attending on December 12th. And that's when they make a recommendation to the city council. And schedule wise, I think we're tentatively scheduled to go to a city council work session on January 18th. And then their public hearings will follow probably in February and March.
Just to add to that, Pauline, you sent this information out to a lot of us. I'm not sure if the entire mailing list, but I think, didn't you send this out in early October?
And August.
Oh, in August. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've had these changes since August, and some of us have had an opportunity to really look at this. So I don't feel like it's coming off as moving too fast, and which is kind of nice. We've had a lot of time to live with it, a lot of time to review the changes, because it has been a lot. Like Pauline said, close to 98 pages that we had to review. And at first it seemed very daunting, but when we really boiled it down, a lot of this is just cleanup work. And like Pauline said in her presentation on Monday at the Planning Commission, she'll go into it in a whole lot more detail. And I think that'll be really helpful for a lot of people. So do we have any other questions from the group?
Yeah, this is Jim. I do have a question. Okay. Yeah, I was asking a process question, but it's just been answered. So I guess on this opportunity to attend Monday night, what is the NLA looking for? In other words, just changes. In other words, changes like to the presentation Pauline just made, or if the PC has totally different ideas about certain sections. I'm trying to figure out, what the output of somebody attending that meeting would be, because we do have to report back to the NLA, and so I'm just not sure what to report back. If I were to attend, I wasn't sure what to report back other than say, well, Pauline said it all last month.
Yeah, sorry, Lisa, do you want me to take it?
You go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, with the NLA, I think the purpose of like the memo that will go out tonight and the actual changes and then attending the planning commission meeting on Monday is so that this committee can learn about what's being proposed. And if you feel like there are issues to raise, the committee can discuss before the public hearing that would take place in December, is what I heard from Pauline. So at this point, the person that is attending on Monday would be learning about the code changes more in depth, as you heard, and then bringing that back in a report to this committee, like Chris did with the short-term rental project. And then from there, if there are issues that people take with the changes, then we can discuss that as a committee.
Would Pauline's presentation that's going to be made on Monday night be available for this committee as well? Because if she's going to go into a great depth, I can't see how anybody's going to do a better job than what she's going to do. And going through it at our next meeting, you know, whenever it is in December, you know, it sounds like we've got all the material we already need. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, the path ahead here. Thanks.
Sure. Well, I think that as far as like the meeting attending on Monday, yes, any of you could tune in, but having a representative there to ask questions is just an opportunity, again, that we have as a committee. If you would rather everyone watch it on their own accord, we can definitely do that. I just don't know how that would go over. But Pauline does have a schedule for getting these changes through all of the different committees. And so at this point, like, I'm sorry, Pauline, I'm not familiar with the way that you notice these types of changes or what the process is for bringing them forward. But no, this is not something that all of the committees are receiving presentations on. They're invited to attend these work sessions. Okay, Karen, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just had a question. If the land use committee, chair committee, you've looked at this, I guess my question is there anyone that has already kind of studied the code would be available to go rather than some of us that are, I read it briefly, but I don't know it in detail. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about that? It seems like we should be the land use.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be preferable that we have land use or someone who is familiar with land use there. I have participated in those discussions. I've looked at it pretty carefully. I'm comfortable with the changes. I don't really have any more questions around them, but I am not available on Monday night. So we'll have to find another person. And then in terms of other land use people, gosh, would that be like Gina or Jim? You guys might be the obvious next choices.
Yeah, that's why my hand is up. I'll volunteer to go. It sounds like some of the changes are related to my work as well. So it's probably fine. I should probably listen in on it anyway. And then I think to Jim's concerns about what's the point in sending someone, you know, the planning commission is going to have conversation around the changes. I hope they're going to talk about it. So in addition to Pauline's presentation, there might just be some insights from the planning commission that I could report back on.
Great. Thank you very much thank you for volunteering, Gina. I appreciate that. And then I believe, Shannon, did you have your hand up as well?
Yes, and I read through the whole thing and I don't have any objections to anything that's in it, but I thought Gina raised a couple of really good points that to me raised some process questions. That is, okay, if the goat paths aren't already on the map, then, you know, SOL, right? I mean, so I guess I'm wondering, how would a process happen that says, okay, when a piece of property comes forward for development, there's a land survey of what paths are on that property, because paths happen frequently. And you don't necessarily need to map all of Bend to keep up with it. but you might when there's an open space and there's a big development going in.
So this
Sure.
sounds like it,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, this sounds like it's a really good question as part of a discussion at the Planning Commission. And so, you could always submit this ahead of time, ahead of the Planning Commission meeting, and send it to the commissioners as a point of question. Maybe it'll be something that they want to discuss.
And since a couple people have this question, we can address it. And Gina, when you're at the Planning Commission work session, you can participate. So you can ask these questions on behalf of the NLA on Monday. And then at your next meeting, you can report back and let them know what you've learned. And it'll be good on Monday because Janet will be there, and Janet is the one, she just knows all the bike paths and the low stress networks 1 and 2 and how it all ties together when it comes to development. I know the pathways were identified during the TSP process, and that's why we have the maps adopted in the transportation system plan. So that was a huge community process. So I don't see us going back and adding more paths at this time on that map. And that's way outside the scope of this Bend Development Code update. But as for process and understanding how it works, that would be definitely fair of you to ask during that work session. I'll give Janet a heads up too. But we'll be able to address that better with the other staff members there on Monday.
And I'm hearing about how it works. And what I'm saying is, what if there's a better way for it to work? How would that process happen?
Yeah, I think that those, again, are process questions that the NLA could raise as a committee. So reframing it, if you're looking at trails that did not make it into the transportation system plan, that's the document I think that Pauline was referencing. So where there's maps already with those trails in. And so how would we make additional or include additional trails into those mapping systems? Is that kind of your question, so that they're protected?
Yes, and rather than sort of canvass all of the city to find those, a trigger could be a big development that goes in. That is,
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Shannon, I don't have the answer for you today, but I think what I can do is write it down and talk to a few people and see if I can get back to you with some information on how the NLA could talk about that.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions, Michaela?
I don't see any more hands.
Okay. So we have a volunteer. Again, thank you, Gina. And we don't need to take a vote on that, do we, Michaela?
No.
Perfect. Then Pauline, thank you very much for the presentation. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
We'll move into representative reports. And let's see, I'll go back to our roll call. So I'll just go through the roll call order. First person up, John Bennett.
Yeah, so last month for our Mountain View monthly meeting, we didn't hold our traditional meeting. We co-sponsored the League of Women Voters candidate panels that were held at Larkspur. So we kind of encouraged our Mountain View Neighborhood Association members to participate and join in that discussion instead of doing a normal monthly meeting. And then going forward for our meeting at the end of November, we've decided to host it at Barnes and Noble. I had mentioned that we were doing that a little more informally in the past, where it was maybe just like one person from our board would meet up with people there for like an hour on, say, a Saturday, but we're actually going to hold our whole meeting there, possibly up to 2 hours. And we met with the manager at Barnes and Noble, and they said they're happy to host us. They'll set aside some tables, and they'll even offer a $1 discount on all coffee, drinks, or whatever that people buy. So it's a pretty inviting format, I think, for people to kind of come out, have kind of a meet and greet, sip some coffee by their fireplace there, and feel like it's a welcome invitation for maybe people who normally wouldn't want to attend a meeting. Maybe some people find like a traditional board meeting kind of boring or whatever. So We kind of bounced this idea that, having more kind of fun meetup type things where people can, feel a little more casual about it is a good way to welcome new people to join the discussion. So that's what we'll be doing here the last Monday of November for our meeting. And that's all I have to mention right now.
Great. Thanks, John. Next up, Karen Bergsbeck.
And I want to say that's a great idea, John, at Barnes and Noble. I think we're talking about doing more casual meetings as a result of you doing those kind of meet and greets. So thank you for sharing. We had our annual meeting last month, and we had good attendance for our neighborhood association. There were over 45 people that attended online. We did presentations on transportation projects within our neighborhood, and that was of high interest, as well as short-term rentals. One of the things we started doing is a monthly survey in our newsletter, and the last topic was the concerts at the amphitheater, where our association has gotten a lot of complaints regarding the noise level at the amphitheater. And I'm raising that because it would appear that that might become a citywide issue rather than a neighborhood issue. Because I've seen other neighborhoods, and on Nextdoor, there appears to be some petitions as well from other neighborhoods. But we're going to be discussing the results of the survey at our board meeting next week. And then we do have a good working relationship with the amphitheater staff. So the next thing would be for our association to meet with them and to see what we can do to address some of the issues that have come up. But anyway, that's it from Southern Crossing.
Thank you very much, Karen. Next up, Cody Campbell.
Hi, how's it going? We've been construction going around in our neighborhoods over here, a lot of road stuff. Got that 97 upgrade. We have that Costco project that's going on that I'm not sure if that's going to go through or not, with the developers asking for all those exemptions. Also been trying to positions. We've had some minor success with online campaigns, but we're hoping to expand on that, get some more people on board. That's all for us.
Great, thank you very much. Cody, I'm curious, are you guys doing any kind of survey of your neighborhood association members on this topic, on the Costco topic?
Yeah, it comes up just about every meeting, and then we have a few email chains going around pulling the board. It's pretty split 50-50 on some people that really want it over in our area, and others that don't see the point of moving the Costco and then having this big development and asphalt lake, as they like to call it over there. There's some environmental concerns, but it's fairly split right down the middle. We don't really have a strong for or against group of people.
Great, thanks for answering. Next person, Jim Christo.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's see. So we had our annual meeting back in September. I'm just reporting back because I wasn't at the last NLA meeting due to travel. And we had over 40 people there, a lot of presentations. And it went over very, very well. We did it at the Jewel Elementary School, which we've done it in the past. And it was just it's just a great experience. We also had the next board meeting at the Pines, which is a very unique development. It's manufactured houses on rented land. And so we're getting some of the residents of the Pines to attend. We hope to do some more of that in the future, maybe next year. So that's kind of a good thing as well, because we're trying to expand our purview. We've also added a new board director who's going to be more concerned with communications. So we're now up to 5. We're revamping our website and our email list. So things that could not get done, last year and the previous year due to the lack of board members, we're now tackling, with gusto here. The other thing I wanted to mention is on the no gas station protest movement. SEBNA has been very much involved in that. In all the surveys that have been done in the local area, over 80% of the respondents have been in opposition to the gas station and a drive-through convenience store. And there's going to be a hearing on Friday, November 18th for a hearing examiner to look at the application there. And so we'll be getting ready to basically present our case. And so it's going to be interesting. So anyways, thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Jim. Gina from River West, you're up.
Thanks. Yeah, not a heck of a lot to report. I was inspired by Mountain View and so called Bend Bikes or emailed and met up with them to talk about kind of engaging them with River West. And so we've identified a few things that we want to try to work on together, mostly related to transportation projects in River West and how those get designed. And then I'm curious, everyone's talking about annual meetings. This is always a topic among my board, and we always debate when the meeting should be held. And so I don't know, Michaela, if you could shoot me an email after, if everybody's interested, maybe you could respond to everybody with when are annual meetings typically held in the year? And if there's any times of year that seem to be best attended. I feel like my board's recreating the wheel on that a little bit. We don't need to, maybe. And anything else right now? Not really. Yeah, that's about it. So thanks.
Thank you, Gina.
Yeah.
Chris Freeze.
Oh, thank you. Our issue is the old one of cut through traffic, but I would say our board has done very well getting to know city staff and work on the neighborhood street safety program. We had a proposal that one was supposed to be funded, and it was to slow down traffic on the streets. The city put in sidewalks, but nothing would slow traffic on Sizemore and the cut through traffic that's coming. So the board is well connected with city staff. I find that useful. We've met with the principal of Amity, which has a lot of kids dropped off and major safety issues. People going quickly down Wall Street and trying to drop their kids off in the middle of traffic. That's a safety issue, and we met with the principal, and surprising, the school is all a magnet, so there really aren't neighborhood or residents that much go there. So is it really a neighborhood issue? And we had our meeting at the Boneyard on Hill Street, sort of the back end of our neighborhood, and it was well attended, a good event. I think we should probably do it twice a year. And we may have a neighborhood yard sale that will happen in the spring, which mostly gets neighbors out and meeting other neighbors.
Anything else, Chris?
Oh, that's all I can come up with.
Okay, that's a lot. Good job. Yeah. Next person, Shannon.
There. Let's see, topics at our last meeting. Let's see, I guess there was two questions coming forward that are the blue bikes gonna stay? and you know, is there a process to sort of have people evaluate, is that a good idea for Bend? A lot of people think they're kind of a safety concern because they're just sort of left all over the place and they're kind of an eyesore and penalties aren't big enough and yada yada. So that's a question. The other one is about e-bikes and scooters and whether apparently minors are not, legally allowed, but they zip around, and is there any enforcement potential going to happen by the city is the second question. And then, and the group is planning its annual meeting. We've got 1 to 2 new board member potentials that I think are going forward. So some new life there, deciding on a place for the annual meeting right now.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Michaela, with those questions, how do we want to handle those?
Yeah, I can send them out in a response to the entire board, because I know it's not just a Summit West issue. So we'll get the responses out after the meeting. John?
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michaela.
Sorry to interrupt everybody. I have to leave tonight's meeting. I have to attend my annual HOA board meeting where I'm running for re-election for the HOA board. So I have to bounce from this meeting to go to that meeting. So sorry that I got to leave you guys, but thanks for everything you're doing, and I'll see you soon.
Hi, John. Thank you. Let's see, our next person on the list, Chris Pearson.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. We had our last ABNA meeting the day after the last NLA meeting, and we get and have gotten very little attendance on our Zoom meetings. So I think there's recognition that we need to start doing some of the stuff that y'all are doing and go live. So we're starting to look at that. That was one issue. The other issue, and this is one I've sort of personally pushed with, along with our land use person, is becoming more active with FireWise safety steps, and not so much in the sense that we educate people on what needs to be done, but on ways to find people to comply with what needs to be done. And it sort of raises the same issues as the energy scores in terms of the mandatory nature of them, and whether that's really the only effective way to get those to be effective, which I guess we'll discuss as we discuss the energy scores. But anyway, that's something I'm pushing. Lisa, I know you and I have had some contact about that. I'm just kind of curious how we can make the issue, make it more effective, the fire safety steps that need to be taken, because without some sort of mandatory push, I don't think that most people are willing to do it. And if most people aren't willing to do it, it's not ultimately going to be that successful, because it's the weakest link is going to be the problem. So that's where we're at. I think that's everything. Yeah, that's about it. We have another meeting next week, so more news at that point. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Elizabeth Rhodes, you're up.
Thanks. We in Southwest Bend have continued to sort of hobble along, literally. Our land use chair and co-chair broke both of her legs back in August, but she is on the way to recovery, making progress, so that's great. We did end up canceling our fall annual meeting. Normally we have 2 meetings, one in October and one in April. And because we have been stretched so thin, we did not hold our October meeting, but are looking forward to a spring meeting and doing something more social and trying to chip away at the planning well in advance for that meeting. We've also been had the PLA, property line adjustment applications, that the COID property and that adjoins Century West, Southern Crossing, and Southwest Bend. There was a comment period, a public comment period. We encouraged people to submit comments, and there were 338 comments submitted to that process. And that was pretty exciting. And I think that's about it on our end.
Great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Ross, you're up.
Yeah, it can be pretty brief. Jim covered the bulk of update around the gas station. We did a little joint survey. We got over 300 respondents. So between Southeast Bend and Old Farm District. So pretty good turnout from a survey perspective. And yeah, about 80% are against combined. It's a little bit different. Old Farm is more like 75-25. or 75-20 for against versus all for the gas station, but obviously in general, it's everybody's fairly against it. Our next meeting is this upcoming Monday. Let's see, other things that we're working on is kind of budget and a treasury report, trying to get that put back in place. It was something that we used to do back in like 2020. I don't think it's been done. It was not properly managed last year, just to try to ensure that our neighborhood handles the budget that is allotted to them. Neighborhood association handles the budget allotted to them. And I think that's about it.
Great. I think I've seen new signs in the Old Farm District on the slowdown sign. So it looks like you guys went away from what we had done a couple of years ago, and you created your own. How's that working for you?
Yeah, so the speeding around Old Farm District has certainly seemed to have gotten a lot worse over the last couple of years. So there's been a lot of concern from the residents on it, as well as the board. We've taken also some surveys a couple months ago on where to put some like speed radar signs, some slowdown signs essentially. Those don't go up until April, I believe. So we're planning on providing that input to the city with some recommendations on where to put those. But yeah, are the other signs working? I don't really know. But it's something we're going to continue to try to do.
Okay, thank you, Russ. And then I think for my own report for Century West, we have not met last month. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have a quorum for our meeting next week. So I don't have a lot to report from Century West. And I did see that Cassie joined us. Michaela, this wasn't on our agenda, but I had attended the council meeting on 10/19, and that was mostly around CFACs. Is there any reason that I should give an update?
I'm sorry, I missed that. CFEC, yeah, if there's anything in particular that you'd like to share from that, I believe it was kind of an overview about the entire project, right? And we're going to have a lot of opportunities to be talking about that.
Yeah, so I don't want to repeat anything, and I certainly don't want to even pretend that I know anything more than Cassie. That she's the expert. She needs to give us the details. I do want to pass on some of the comments or some of the concerns that I heard from other advisory boards. There were some concerns about this being a voluntary program. There were concerns about the incremental additional costs, and there were actually a lot of concerns about this being an equitable program. Some people are feeling like this may hurt seniors because of code violations or fines, and so there was a little bit of a discussion around equity. But with that, Michaela, would you like to introduce Cassie?
Sure. And just to be clear, your comments were regarding the home energy score and not CFEC, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So yeah, Shannon, your hand is up. So before I hand it over to Cassie, can I help answer a question?
No, I have to leave, unfortunately. So I'm going to miss Cassie's presentation, but I will find it online, I'm pretty sure, right?
Okay. Thank you. With that, I will hand it over to Cassie Lacey. Cassie is a senior management analyst in the city manager's office, and she's going to give us an overview of the home energy score program. You'll probably share this already, but just keep in mind while you're watching this that the council will be reviewing the proposal and considering a first reading on December 7th. So, and I think that's right. That just changed.
Yeah, and it's possible it will change again. Okay. Right now it's tentatively scheduled for December 7th.
So if there's any action like that the NLA thinks that needs to be taken, today is the time to talk about it. We won't have another meeting before then. So again, just keep that in mind as we're going through this. And Cassie, it's all you.
Okay, thank you. And I will be joined in a moment by two of the Environment and Climate Committee members, because this proposal really is coming from them to the council. They're meeting with the Affordable Housing Committee downstairs right now, which is also why I was running late. So anyway, when you see two gentlemen walk in, they're here just to help field questions and share the committee's perspective on the program. So for some background, the Home Energy Score program is an initiative of the Bend Community Climate Action Plan, which is our strategic plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions community-wide, which came from back in 2016, the City Council established greenhouse gas reduction goals through a climate resolution. And then there was a long planning process, and with the result in 2019 adopting the Bend Community Climate Action Plan. So the Home Energy Score program is a project from within that plan. One of the things we found in developing the plan is that greenhouse gas emissions from buildings is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Bend, and in particular among buildings, the residential stock of buildings is the largest contributor of that. So the Home Energy Score program is seen as one of the more effective tools we have to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from that high impact sector. And the Environment and Climate Committee was tasked by the council this biennium to pick a handful of projects from the community, we call it the Community Climate Action Plan as the CCAP, to implement this biennium. And they picked the Home Energy Score program as a priority project this biennium, and the council agreed with that. So that's kind of the background about why we're talking about this program to begin with. A home energy score is a standard home energy assessment tool that explains the energy efficiency of a home through a replicable and affordable methodology that assesses a home's assets. It contains a numeric score that reflects an energy efficiency rating, estimated utility costs for the home, and suggested measures to improve the energy efficiency. The main idea behind a home energy score is that it can work like a miles per gallon rating for a vehicle. So it provides information about how efficiently a home uses energy to prospective buyers, which can inform their purchase decision if they can compare it to another home. They provide transparency around ongoing energy costs required to maintain and live in a home, ensuring that homeowners can factor energy costs into account when making purchase decisions. And the bigger picture hope of an energy score program is that it would lead to a greater investment in voluntary energy efficiency measures in Bend by making that information more readily available and easy to understand, which empowers people to move forward and make those energy efficiency upgrades. This slide shows an example of what a home energy scorecard looks like. On the right side of the screen, you have the front side of the card, which shows the numerical score and the estimated energy costs of the home. And then on the left side of the screen, we have the back side of the card, which shows the priority energy improvements that have a payback within 10 years. So this document here would be what this is what we're talking about when we're talking about a home energy score. This would be what people would be expected to be using. The Home Energy Score program uses a specific tool that was developed by the U.S. Department of Energy because they recognized a need to have a standard assessment to easily compare energy use across the housing market. Cities can become partners with the U.S. DOE in order to use these tools to establish policies like the one that is being proposed. And then in Oregon, the Oregon DOE supports this program so much for Oregon communities that they formed a proxy partnership with the U.S. DOE. And they actually take on the requirements of the partnership on behalf of Oregon cities. And they did that so that smaller Oregon cities are able to have access to these tools without being subject to the requirements of a normal US DOE partner. They also hired Earth Advantage to work statewide to support the program and provide various duties that are needed to make the program run, like a quality assurance program and assessor onboarding and training. So by creating a home energy score program here, we're able to leverage this tremendous amount of expertise and resources and program development that has gone into it. So it's not like a whole like separate new program that was kind of, invented by, the committee or the city of Bend. It's really just trying to tap into these resources that are being used nationwide. Because of that Oregon Department of Energy partnership, the state of Oregon has they have the highest number of home energy score programs in the country. The cities of Portland, Hillsborough, and Milwaukee all have programs like we're proposing, and there's many other cities that are currently considering them. And then elsewhere in the country, Austin, Texas, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Berkeley, California are just a couple of cities that have these programs in place as well. There have been a few studies in the last few years that have attempted to measure the effectiveness of these programs. The most recent one came out earlier from this year from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. They had some interesting findings, including that a 1-point increase in a home energy score was associated with a 5.5 reduction in the odds of a loan going 30 days delinquent. A $100 decrease in estimated annual energy bills was associated with a 2.3 decrease in the odds of a loan going delinquent. That just shows the value that people are able to actually avoid getting into a bad situation with their loan when they're empowered with this information. And these relationships are only statistically significant in places where a mandatory home energy score program or a mandatory home energy assessment was required at the time of listing your home. And then another study was completed in 2019. It was a joint initiative between the University of California, Berkeley, MIT, and the University of Chicago. They studied the impacts of the home energy score program in Austin, Texas, which is the longest running program in the country. They found data that showed that requiring home energy scores increased price capitalization of energy efficiency, meaning that homeowners who had taken the step to make energy efficiency improvements in their homes were able to capitalize on that when they went to sell their homes in ways that people who did not have home energy scores were able to do, because a lot of energy efficiency investments are invisible and it's not easy to show prospective buyers the value of those. And they also found that that the program did encourage energy savings residential investments, which they measured through the amount of incentives that they gave out through their utility. And then to touch on how the home energy score program supports equity objectives, because the committee really does see this as an equity forward program. It's really seen as a buyer protection program. So it assures people understand the energy costs of the homes that they are considering buying, and it provides transparency about features of the home that are otherwise hidden but have significant cost implications for owning that home. So it's really important to buyers, you know, to get into a house and it may be $100 a month to heat and cool their home, or some homes are, you know, $500-600 a month to heat and cool their homes. And so the home energy score, in addition to the energy efficiency goals, it also supports just kind of this transparency of information for buyers. I'll get into the program details next, but the proposal does also include a low-income assistance program that would cover the cost of obtaining the score for homeowners who can't afford to obtain the score. And then there are additional other programs outside of the home energy score program that are available to support low-income homeowners and actually making those upgrades themselves. So the home energy score program is not it works best when you think of it in tandem with these other programs that are out there to help people make energy efficiency upgrades, like weatherization programs and new programs coming from the Inflation Reduction Act. Okay, so that was all kind of just the why behind the program. And so now I'll explain what is actually being proposed. So the program would require that all homes that are listed for sale and vend are required to obtain a home energy score from a state licensed home energy assessor. A copy of the score must be provided to all the brokers working on the sale of the building. And then that score must be made available to all prospective buyers who visit the home. Score has to be included in any public listing of the home as well. And the types of homes that are included in the program includes any residential structure. It's basically any single family home who, you know, like standing on its own lot. And then it also includes homes that are side by side, so townhomes, duplexes, and even triplexes, as long as they're side by side and not stacked, even if they share a lot with another home, like in the case of a townhouse, anywhere where the home extends from foundation to roof would all be covered in the program. Stacked housing, like larger multifamily, are not covered in the program because the tool itself, just the modeling that went into it, doesn't work for a stacked building types. There are a couple of limited exemptions for the program, which generally includes sales that occur through involuntary change of title. So that would be like title transfers due to an inheritance or something where the home's not really being sold officially anyway. And then for homes where significant financial hardship is indicated, such as a trustee's sale or a deed in lieu of foreclosure sale. And the code that's being proposed has a list of exactly what falls under that exemption, but it's meant to be limited to truly kind of extenuating circumstances. The program is proposed to include a program where the city will cover the cost of obtaining the score to the seller of the home. The idea is to structure that low-income assistance program as low barrier as possible. So the way it's worked in the other communities is that the city has a relationship with an assessor who goes and does the home energy scores for the low-income homeowners. They can contact, if they qualify, they can contact that assessor. The assessor goes and does the score for free, provides the free score to the homeowner, and then the city pays the assessor directly for that score at the end of the month, like en masse. And so that's been a really nice system because it's just it's not like the seller or their broker have to front the cost and go through an onerous process of getting paid back. They just, from their perspective, they just get the free score. So we'd like to set it up similarly here. We need to, once the program's established, we'll have to hopefully find a partner that, we can set up that program with, but we'd like to do it like that or some other way like that where it really is low barrier. New construction has kind of an easier path to get a score through a pre-construction assessment where the home energy assessor can review construction documents to get all the information needed so that they can get the score before the home is finished construction, which is when most of them are being sold. And then in the case where many homes are being built in the same land division, many identical homes like subdivisions, when they go up and they have a couple of the same floor plan kind of replicated across the neighborhood, using that pre-construction assessment, they have to get scores for each of those homes, but they can essentially the assessor can just replicate the scores because all the information on the construction documents is the same. So it makes it a really affordable and easy process to get a bunch of scores for builders that are doing those subdivisions. There are several platforms across the nation that host the home energy scores, and we're served by one called the Green Building Registry, which is owned and operated by Earth Advantage. So once the home energy score assessment is complete, it gets automatically uploaded to the Green Building Registry, which is public, and any address can go and be searched to find the home energy score. And then this database can be used in partnership with the MLS, system to populate the real estate listings with the information with just the click of a button if the MLS allows us to do so. And so that makes it also just very easy for real estate agents that are, kind of shepherding this process. It makes it very easy for them to include it in their listings. And then the program is proposed as using a proactive enforcement model that heavily emphasizes education. So the goal of the program is to get as many homes as possible with scores. The goal of the program is not to issue fees for non-compliance because the program is not effective if scores aren't being obtained. So that really is the goal. And so the vision for program management is that there would be a staff person who identifies homes that are out of compliance. And then once the homeowner gets contacted by that staff person, they'll have a 15-day grace period to obtain a score. And during that 15 days, that staff person, part of their role is to actually provide resources, information, help that homeowner get a score, connecting them with assessors, connecting them to the low-income program if they qualify. And then after the 15 days, it's considered a code violation and would be referred to code enforcement. At that point, it goes through our standard code violation process, which provides an additional 30 days before you're actually issued any penalties. So as far as what is ongoing program management look for the city, it's really just that process of identifying those homes out of compliance and providing them with the resources. And then just hosting a program webpage, providing a point of contact, and monitoring the program for effectiveness. So we anticipate that being about a quarter to a half FTE at the most. So that's an overview of the program. Like Michaela said, the council is currently scheduled to have a first reading. So it's an ordinance adoption process because it's new code to establish this. So they are scheduled to do the first reading on December 7th and the second reading on December 21st. It's December 7th where they'll be doing, you know, the kind of public hearing or public input. And then the last thing to note is that the program would actually go into effect on July 1st, 2023. And that is to allow time for people to actually get trained to become assessors. Because right now, we do have some assessors in town right now, but what other communities have seen is that once a program gets adopted and people understand that there's kind of a business opportunity here, then they go and they get trained to become assessors. So that in between time will give time for the market to kind of be ready to support the program, and then also for us to just you know, build up the program on the back end and allocate resources and that sort of thing. And the last thing that I'll answer, because I'm sure it's a question, is so the cost of obtaining the scores is set by the private market, but other markets have seen is that they're roughly between $150 to $275. So the number we've been putting out there is our expectation is $150 to $300 for a kind of a 2,000 square foot home. So that's what we're expecting the scores to be. And the staff and council are intending to be monitoring the cost of scores and monitoring how long it takes people to be able to get a score, to make sure that, you know, it's not that they're falling within our expectations, so that if scores were to be all of a sudden significantly more expensive than that, that's something the city would also be concerned about. Like, I'm sure a lot of people here would be concerned about that. And so we intend to monitor that. And if they do go really wonky, we would, you know, the intention would be to intervene somehow, whether that's pausing the program or whether that's identifying ways we can bring the scores down by subsidizing some of those, or I don't know what those would be, but just to note that it's definitely something we're paying attention to. But other markets haven't seen that. And, you know, the best information we have to go off of is what other people have seen in their communities. So with that, I can answer any questions. I'm assuming my committee members are having a very robust discussion with the Affordable Housing Committee downstairs, and that's why they're not here yet. But hopefully they'll join, because they're really the ones that, especially just in terms of making the case for why they feel this program is so powerful. That's, you know, definitely in their court, but I'll do my best to answer kind of objective questions.
Jim first. Yeah, Jim.
Okay, thank you. I have shared this presentation with my board, and they do have a number of concerns. And approaching this from a homeowner, the only thing the homeowner can do, the only power he has, is to ask for an assessment. Now, if any of you have tried to hire a contractor lately, you know that sometimes it takes weeks or even months to get a contractor on board to do work on your house. And so one of the concerns is if one's going to sell a house and I call an assessor, he gets back to me 2 weeks later, which is not unusual for contractors, and says, oh, I'm not available for 3 months. And I can see this process dragging on until the homeowner gets lucky enough to find an assessor who has time in a reasonable period to do the assessment. All this kind of creates delays. And if the homeowner's got to move, you know, he's got a bad choice to make. Either he just says, well, I've requested it, but it won't happen for 2 months, and puts it on the listing and then gets fined by the city. It just becomes a cost of doing business. So we're thinking there may be a better way to do this and have a central scheduling done by the city, where the homeowner goes on a website, requests it, the city finds somebody's available, and, you know, schedules it. And the advantage to the city is they would know right away if there's a big problem, instead of having to have a quarter to half a FTE, you know, looking at all the listings. They'd know within minutes, you know, if the assessors are not available. It's too, you know, it takes 3 months to get things assessed and all that. So I'm just wondering if the people who have designed this program have kind of considered, you know, an alternative way to do this without putting so much impetus on the homeowner. And I do have other questions, but I wanted to get that one answered first. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting suggestion. And to be honest, that's just not one that we had thought of or heard of specifically. We have heard a lot of concerns about like, what if the assessments take a really long time to get, because of, yeah, like you said, we all have had the experience of taking forever to get certain services done for our home. Our intent in the intent, not in the way that you were sharing, is so when we look at other markets, like we've been paying close attention to what their experience have been, understanding that Bend, of course, is different, but at least it's a glimpse. And you can actually, in the 3 other markets, you can go online and you can schedule a home energy score for tomorrow for $150. And so the experience has shown that it has not been a serious issue to get the scores quickly. We intend to be monitoring that. And if they were that high, we would, like I said, we would, if it was taking that long, our intention would be to like put a pause to the program. Like the intention is definitely not to say, okay, well, that's just end up being the cost of business as everyone pays a $750 fine. Like if it's months to get the program, the city would intervene and say, we're not enforcing this, or we're pausing the program. However, I do think your idea, like the idea that you share, if it does come to pass that scores are taking a really long time to get, the idea that you suggest might be one that we look into to say, okay, how can we adjust the program to try to accommodate this better? That's not to say we can't consider it more off the bat. What I would suggest is for the feedback that we give council, because at this point, the committee has kind of recommended their proposed program. So, but when the NLA, if you decide to provide feedback to the council, sharing some of these ideas, like these implementability ideas, how can we make it better, would be a great thing to share directly with the council. And it's definitely one that I'll keep in mind as well.
So I understand, just to follow up on what you said, the time to share this would be December 7th. That's the public comment period for this program. Is that correct?
December 7th at the soonest. There are rumors that it may be postponed further, which would give you guys a little bit more time, but we're not going to be sure about that for probably another week or two. So it might be best to assume December 7th. Yeah.
Okay, I'll wait for my questions because I know there's several other hands raised and I want to give everybody a chance to ask their questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
My question is more sort of a broad question, and how my understanding is that having a home energy score, the ultimate goal is to encourage homeowners and all buildings to be more energy efficient. And so I guess my question is, how do you see the home energy score accomplishing that? Is the thought that when a homeowner goes to sell and they get their score, if they have a low score and they learn that, oh, I can just add insulation to my attic and increase my score, that would be something that would happen? Is that kind of the philosophy behind this?
Yeah, I think it could, the idea is that it could kind of happen in a number of different ways, but just by having without the information, we know it's unlikely to happen at all in most cases. Obviously, I know people can't opt to go do energy audits themselves, but the reality is that's just not very common. So the idea is if it's just more common knowledge, it even gets people thinking like, oh yes, we can do something about that. So I think the two situations could be one that a seller is like, oh, I should improve this before I list the house because I know it'll look better. The other, and I think the more likely scenario, is that when someone is buying a house, they have that list. And you know, when someone buys a house, it's more common to make kind of those little upgrades in that first month of living in a home, or maybe even before you move into the home. So it's kind of like a good time for people to have the information like, okay, I know I'm buying this house. I see it's not energy efficient. So now I know that I'm going to go ahead and make that upgrade as like a priority project for myself. So that's kind of the other way that it can happen. And so in a way, it's almost not dissimilar to finding out that a house you're buying, say you find out a house you're buying is really inefficient. You really like the house, but it's really inefficient. It's not that different than finding out like it has a bad roof that's going to need to be replaced really soon. It's just something that you then factor in. You're like, I can buy this house, but it does mean I'm going to have to buy a new roof in 2 to 3 years. And that's however much money. So it's meant to, it can just bring energy efficiency into something that we have the ability to consider the way you would want to know about a roof, you know? So that's the idea.
Okay, thanks.
And these, so I'm joined by Neil Bonsgard, he's the chair of the Environment and Climate Committee. And then Peter is another member of the Environment and Climate Committee as well. We're just getting to questions. Oh.
Great. We were just down at the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee answering questions. So we're fresh. We can give you the better answer because we've already talked through it once. So maybe a little bit more consolidated.
Yes. Well, let's go to Karen with your next question.
I'm really concerned about the city having adequate resources to be able to pay the fee for low-income homeowners. So what kind of conversation is there to make sure there's adequate resources to pay those fees for all the people that may be eligible? And then how do you propose doing outreach to that population? And then with that is if a low-income homeowner gets a low score, what programs are currently in place to help them improve that score? If that's the goal, kind of like what Elizabeth was asking about. So.
Yeah, those are great questions. So the first part, so Hillsborough is a similar sized city population wise. They spend less than $10,000 per year on their low income assistance program. And at $10,000 per year, that's a pretty easy cost to absorb by the city. Even if it's 3 times the number that Hillsborough has, it's well, like I was pleasantly surprised when I heard what other cities are allocating to that program, that it's not a huge amount. So it feels like it should be manageable. It will have to come through the budget process, and the council will have to, be willing to allocate that from the general fund or another funding source. But it's not extremely significant. As far as how we get the word out, I think we hope to, leverage the same processes we use to get the word out about other types of low-income assistance programs. Like the city has other programs, like we have a utility assistance program. So we have some channels we can use through that. Through the utility program, we have, we can reach pretty much every homeowner in Bend. And then of course we would want to partner with third-party nonprofits that serve low-income residents as well, to make sure we can get the information out through them, since those are trusted relationships that they have, and not everyone has relationships with the city. So it's definitely nice to get some of those other partnerships. And then the last piece about resources to help people make those upgrades, because that's something that has come up a lot. Like, what about low-income people who can't afford to make the upgrades? Like, how is this helpful? And there are existing programs out there. There's weatherization programs that are really longstanding that Neighbor Impact manages. We're at kind of an exciting time right now because with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's actually very, very significant additional programs that will come online over the next year to do major energy efficiency improvements for low income. And those ones are like, they can cover up to 100% of the cost of efficiency upgrades for low income homes. I think there's even some additional programs, that are not restricted only to low income residents. So there's a lot of resources. Right now, we're like in an especially lucky time because of those resources. And the hope is actually with the home energy score program, it will help our community members leverage those programs more, because without the home energy score program, many people, especially low income homeowners, they're not even aware. They may not be aware of the energy inefficiency of their home. They don't have time to, it's just not information they know or they're thinking about. And with the home energy score program, they'll have that information, and we hope it's an easier pipeline to actually connect with those resources and actually get the benefit of that. And then the last thing is that if desired, the city could add even additional programs to what's already out there. So there's additional funding coming through the IIJA Act that is formula funding that the city will receive, not a huge amount, but around $150,000 to $200,000 that is meant to be allocated towards energy efficiency work in the community. And so if we wanted to, the city could allocate additional funding to, to kind of double down on some of those resources for low income or other people. And so the idea is that the home energy score, works in tandem with all these other programs to help improve the efficiency for everybody and ultimately benefit those low income people who may otherwise not, even know where to begin.
And if I can add to that real briefly, I think in Cassie's presentation, she showed you an example of what the score or what the actual report looks like. And on that, it's showing what the cost-effective measures would be. So it's specifically highlighting for that house, this is the recommended upgrade that you make. And those are based on what's cost-effective. But then it also is connecting people with those additional resources. And so if there are programs at the time, because this program is, although we're proposing it right now, it will exist for longer than just this current moment of time. Most of the upgrades that happen in our residential housing stock either happens towards the tail end of somebody owning a house because they're thinking about selling it, or it happens within the first couple of years of ownership. And so it's really trying to put that really valuable information right at the time where it matters the most, of saying, hey, here is the resource for the, I will share this example because I think that there's opportunity to communicate better. And I think this is a good communication tool. The Energy Trust has low to moderate income incentives that are available for a lot more people than think that they would be available. They're called savings within reach. And so those types of programs can be highlighted through the scoring process as well. So we see it as a really good opportunity to be able to get more people plugged in to the resources that are available to help. And then in the long run, be able to help them see a better return from both their energy savings and and the potential equity it might add to the house.
So let's go to Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to understand how to communicate with my NA about this. Is this a program that's definitely going through and the upcoming meetings are to discuss how it should be tweaked? Or is it still up in the air whether this program is a sure thing at this point? That's one quick thing. Then this, I take it, does not apply to businesses, or that's how I read it. And I was wondering about that. And then lastly, I was wondering what the con is or the negative is to these programs, because I note that all the cities that have adopted this are deep blue and nothing wrong with that. But I'm just wondering places that have not adopted it, what's the negative about this program, if there is one? Thank you.
So yeah, the first question is it's scheduled to be voted on December 7th. So the council will make a decision.
Voted on. So, where is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's no discussion before that.
Okay.
Well, it's all happened at the same time.
Yeah.
So it is going to the council. The council at that moment will be the one to decide for sure, whether it gets adopted or not adopted. To date, the council has indicated that they do support the program. So we are expecting them to pass it. So I think as far as feedback, of course, anyone can say whatever they want. They can oppose the program and share that with the council if they want. But it also it may be advantageous to use the lens of okay, if this program is going to pass, if the council supports it, what is feedback we want to give to kind of improve the program or make it more implementable. So, you know, however people want to, whatever feedback people want to provide. So, but that, so in December, it will be voted on unless that date gets moved. And then
Businesses. Is it for businesses?
it's not for businesses, it's just residential. And then the downside, I mean, I think that I can let Peter and Neil chime in, but I think the committee doesn't feel that there is a downside.
Well, yeah, so
Well, I'll let them talk.
I see. Hi there. This is Peter. I think it's Christopher Pearson. That's a great question. That was your question. So I think that you really kind of touched on a core concern about the program, and that so the robust body of research we have says that to get the desired outcomes and to have an impact on housing, that the programs are required. And I think there's a ideological divide and difference of opinion that the fact that it's a required program, regardless if there's no other downsides, that alone creates resistance. So, and we've been in quite a few meetings, and so it's the required versus voluntary, which would lead to that, you know, observation that you're making. If that makes sense, if that's kind of tracks.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Great, thanks. At this point, is the program proposed mandatory or voluntary?
It would be a requirement to be mandatory.
Okay, and then how long will an energy score be valid? So if a homeowner gets an inspection, how long is that score valid?
It's valid for 7 years. So if you buy a house and it has a score, and then you go and sell that house in 2 more years and you don't want to get a new score, you can use that same one. So in the event that someone doesn't upgrade, you know, they may want to get a new score because then they can reflect that when selling the house, but you would not be required to for 7 years.
So just to be clear, if I'm the current seller and I go ahead and I get the home energy score and sell that home, and then the new person, maybe they've decided that they don't care for the house or they've got a job change, so they have to turn around and sell the house, they can still use that original home energy score for the second listing. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. If it's within a 7-year time period.
And it's,
Okay.
You're right in that it's tied to the property, not to the person that got the score. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. I'm kind of concerned about the efficiency of this process. So if we're looking at it, somebody had already mentioned, we're really putting a lot of burden on the seller. And for many people in Bend, they may not have the resources to, first of all, cover the home energy score. So if there's a program that can help them pay for the inspection, maybe that could be useful. But the other piece of it is they're going to have to schedule with that contractor. That means that they're probably going to have to take time away from work in order for that process to play out. And so then you get the inspection at the beginning, and then you still have another inspection once the house is going through the sales process. And usually that second inspection is normally paid for by the buyer, because it's in the buyer's best interest to pay for that inspection, because then they own the rights to getting full disclosure about that house. So you've already had, now you've got 2 inspections. And then if you're actually going to have to do any work, or if you're thinking of doing any work, then you've got another contractor that's coming in and having to quote on doing the work. So it just seems like a really inefficient process. I really liked Jim's suggestion earlier about central scheduling. I think that could be useful, but the overall process is really concerning to me.
And I'll add from, because that question came up in another group too, of the difference between having it on the seller side or the buyer side. And I'll kind of turn that around in terms of efficiency, because if this is one of many factors, and it's information that's valuable, but let's be realistic, except for a small portion of the population that might be willing to do an inspection on a house that they don't know that they're going to be putting in an offer for and trying to get that scheduled and pay for that on multiple houses. This isn't going to be the end all be all of every purchase. It's just the goal of the program is to try to make it transparent and a part of the purchasing decision for everybody. So if you get an inspection as a buyer, that information is only really relevant to you. But if you're able to get a home energy score as a seller, that information is available to every single realtor and every single potential home buyer that looks at the house. So I look at it as a very efficient mechanism because it's getting the information at the point where it can actually have an impact on the transaction. I know there were performance things that when I purchased a house that I wasn't excited about, but they weren't, if it was something that maybe in a market world would have impacted the sale price by a couple $1,000s, that's not something that I'm going to walk away from a transaction for. But knowing that up front, then it's kind of more a part of where you're making the offer and what you're making the offer on, because you actually have all the information and it's getting that information available to everybody with just one score. So I think there's some efficiencies there.
So my final comment is just the overall cost. So if you consider that roughly there are about 2,500 homes in Bend sold in every year, and let's say the fee is about $200, then you're kind of generating $500,000 of cost. And are we really getting the benefit out of in the community for that amount of money? I question that. And then I wanted to clarify, did you say that you're thinking that this program can be managed by a quarter to a half of an FTE?
Yes. Again,
Okay.
that's what other cities have seen. Like in some cases, they scale their enforcement and they have like 1/50th of an FTE doing it. So I think to do it well, you want at least a quarter to a half. But that's the max I've seen for many of the other communities.
If anyone else has questions, go right ahead.
And I'm sorry that I have to run. I have an inspection. But thank you all. And if you have follow-up, I'm sure that we'll connect through Cassie on anything else that comes up.
Neil.
Yeah, thanks y'all.
Jim, go ahead.
Okay, I just have a couple more questions here. I understand there's some dwellings that are exempt, like trustee sales, ADUs, manufactured dwellings, and I was wondering what's the logic behind that? And part of that question is trustee sale, and I know that several homes here are held in trust, and mine is one of them. So does that qualify as a trustee sale if I were to sell it? So a couple questions.
Yes. So as far as the exemptions, there's a few different reasons for the various ones. The ones that have to do with like financial hardship are part of a list that is fairly standardized across all of the state's home energy score programs. So when we took that list, we used the same list that they were using in other communities because there is kind of a desire to have somewhat of a standard program. And they're meant to be sales where there is like exceptional level of financial hardship. As far as like what's considered a trustee sale or not, I would have to defer to like our legal team who's interpreting exactly like how those exemptions work out. And so that's that category of exemptions. The other ones that don't qualify, like the manufactured housing and the ADUs, is actually more about a limitation of the tool itself. So there was a lot of modeling that went into the tool, and some of the base assumptions that go into the tool require it to be a home that extends from foundation to roof and has like just the base structure that manufactured homes don't have. The ADUs one is a little bit different because a standalone ADU potentially could work, but because an ADU is a part of another home, the decision was made to have the home, the primary dwelling unit, be the one that gets the score. and not have like multiple scores per property. And in some cases, depending on the way the ADU is built, there's also issues with just like how the model works for that. So it's been, it's simplified things a lot to have it not apply to ADUs. So anyway, there's a couple of reasons for each of the different areas of what's not applicable. Did you have another question? I can't remember now.
Yeah, one more question. I understand from looking through the materials, and thank you for those answers. Some, they kind of make sense, that they're going to start looking at, energy generation systems like wind and solar. And I was wondering, if they do that, do they apply some sort of standard process? Because we all know that wind and solar can be highly variable depending on cloud cover, wind speed, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just wondering how they were going to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, so I know that like solar, it helps your score if you have solar. I don't know about wind, because wind is not usually something that happens at like the residential scale. But like if someone has a solar system, it is included on there as like an asset. And it gets factored into, as far as like how much power you get from solar will vary year to year, but so do a lot of other aspects of a house. So the home energy score rates just how the home functions regardless of behavior, and it would be regardless of like environmental conditions. In the same way where like a home, 1 year, if it's a super cold year, the same home is going to use way more energy in that really cold year than it does in another year where it's like very mild. And similarly, they may get less solar on that year where it was really cold, say it was just very overcast too. They would have less solar, but that kind of circumstantial differences or behavior change does not affect the score. The score is based on like, how does the home run in general, based on the actual physical assets of the home.
Okay, that's all I had. Once all the questions are over, I just want to ask a question. What should the NLA do? Should we have a motion to provide some sort of position to the city council? But we can wait till the questions are answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Karen.
I just have more of a process question like Christopher. I'm not sure what the expectation is of taking this to our own NA boards. Is it to educate them, or are you looking for specific comments? And a lot of us have board meetings coming up within the next week or two, and then we won't be meeting again. So the timing. So I'm just not clear on what exact input you're looking for from us as representatives of our boards.
So I think from my well, go ahead. I was just going to say, from my perspective, because we heard the NLA shared some comments to the council on October 16th. So we wanted to make sure, just kind of in response to that, we wanted to make sure that you all had an understanding of how the program worked and we can answer your questions. But yeah, I'll defer to your chair or whoever about kind of how you guys want to move ahead.
That's great. Thank you. And that's right on target. So we briefly touched on this at our last meeting. We decided that we would send a representative, that happened to be me, to the council meeting. And during that session, I did let the council know that we had not heard an official overview of the program. And as part of the council wanting everyone to be informed, and they're trying to do a decent job of collecting feedback from all of the advisory committees, and they're trying to get feedback even from the community. But I really appreciate Cassie being here, as well as members of the climate committee being here, so that we can learn more. But now we're at the point of, do we want to do anything? So I guess that's the first question. Does the NLA feel like we want to do any kind of letter? Is it too premature for us to even prepare that letter at this point? Do you guys feel like you need to go back to your boards and then come back with more information? Do we need a special meeting to talk about just this topic and talk about what kind of feedback we would want to give to the council prior to them meeting on this topic? Michaela, did I miss anything?
No, I think that you covered it well. And of course, if the meeting date does get pushed back, we could cancel a special meeting if we wanted to schedule one and put it on our December agenda to continue discussing and not have that additional meeting. However, with the December 7th date and with only a couple minutes left in the meeting, I would say that it's probably best to either have a special meeting if the NLA does want to do something, or you can assign a couple of folks to go and work on this. However, it wouldn't have the backing of the full committee. So the letter would look like part of our advocacy or our land use group had worked together on a solution. These are our statements. We haven't talked to the rest of the committee about it. So that's always an option as well.
Okay, I would be in favor of a special meeting. So I'll just suggest that. I move that we schedule a special meeting on this topic to for the purpose of discussion and preparation of a letter to the council with our recommendations.
Would that special meeting be like the first week in December? Because I'm going to be gone the last week and a half of November.
Yeah, well,
I think
go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I think we could do it the first week of December because we've got Thanksgiving coming up.
That's why I'm going on travel. Yeah, I would be
did
in favor
anybody
of a
second
special
that?
meeting as well.
Sorry, did anyone second the motion?
Oh,
I will
I'll
second
it.
Okay, we're gonna go with Elizabeth because I saw her hands up
Okay.
prior. And then for the rest of the committee, can I just see a hand all in favor?
Yeah, sure. I'm all for it.
Okay, Gina, I see your hand down.
Not in favor. I think there's
okay.
a lot more important things to deal with than the home energy score thing.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't have my hand up either, Michaela. I just feel like we need to survey our members. I mean, I don't know that our NLA members have any interest in this, so I just.
Yeah.
Okay, so with six in favor, what I'll do is send out of 8, I'll send out a doodle poll for the first week of December, and we'll try and get together a quick, probably hour and a half meeting just to figure out the points that we want to conclude in some sort of statement. So between now and then, I would say, please go back to your neighborhood association boards, share the documents that I have sent out to you about this home energy score program, and then be ready to come to that meeting with ideas, talking points, whatever you think should be included, and we'll discuss that as a committee.
Leading up to that, if we also build up questions that we want to get answered, who can we send those to?
Yeah, so Cassie, I don't want to offer you up.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to answer questions over email. I'm happy to meet with anyone again as well. Like I could join the next discussion to keep answering questions, whatever would be helpful.
Thanks.
Great. I can share that email in a follow-up after this meeting with the doodle poll, and then I'll see that Cassie gets an invitation to that, and Peter and Neil too, if you want.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really helpful, and thanks for answering our questions.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Great. With that, I just want to remind everyone about some important dates. We've already talked about them, so I don't want to rehash too much. November 14th, Planning Commission. Gina's going to be attending that for us. November 16th, we've got the City Council work session, and then regular meeting, and that's going to be the public hearing and first reading on the camping code. And then December 7th, camping code second reading and home energy score first reading. So don't forget about those important dates. Do we have anything else for the good of the order?
The next NLA meeting is when?
Sounds like now it's going to be the first week of December, and then we'll have another one on the 13th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting.
So the 6th and the 13th. Excuse me.
And Michaela, I've already given you a heads up that I'll be absent on December 13th.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We're adjourned.